Welcome to your Optimal Personal Economy podcast with Justin Bennett. Your personal economy is your ability to create, protect, preserve, and utilize your wealth, your financial world. Justin will share strategies and stories to help you optimize your personal economy. Now, on to the show with Justin Bennett and co-host Matt Halloran.
Hello and welcome to episode number 23 with Justin Bennett. Today, Justin's going to talk about a very hot topic and something that a lot of people don't talk about, which is how to mentally and emotionally prepare for retirement, because you go through many changes when you are no longer showing up to work every day. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, sir. And I heard, as we were preparing for this, that you just got back from a retirement party. So I'm assuming that you've got some pretty good insights on this.
Yeah, kind of timely that we have this discussion today. It was last night that I was at a retirement party for a very good client of mine, and it was quite an experience. But what I would like to say, just to kind of get it kickstarted, is that, our listeners might be like, wait, Justin, you're not retired. So how do you, know what it's like to mentally and emotionally prepare for retirement? And, I would just respond by saying, although I, haven't retired personally, and I don't even think I'll ever retire because of how much enjoyment I get out of what I do. But I've certainly spent a fair amount of time studying this and being part of many clients that have transitioned into retirement and now have spent a number of years in retirement. So I can certainly say, Matt, that through the work that I've done for my clients and the people that we serve and the relationships that I've built, I've been part of this transition. And I think, oftentimes people spend a lot of time with this conversation around, the money thing, right? It's like, hey, I've got $3, $4, $5 million in the bank. I've got Social Security and, I've got these expenses. Am I going to be okay? Right. And that's probably like the most common and normal way that people prepare for retirement, right? Would you agree, Matt?
Absolutely, I would.
And I think that there's this whole other element, around like emotionally and psychologically getting prepared for it. And I think, what I gathered last night in talking to not only my client who retired on March 30th, I guess, end of March, but also some of his peers and some other people in the room that had recently retired, is that, they've spent so many years, 30 or 40 years working. And so they've just become so conditioned to waking up in the morning and doing their daily routine around getting ready for work and going to work and coming home and spending time with their family and pressing the repeat button. So I think, just the whole emotional and psychological element of preparing for retirement starts when the decision ultimately is made that somebody will be retiring at some short-term point in the future, right? So it's normally the case that, people make the final, like 100% committed decision 30 to 90 days before it actually happened.
Okay.
And, even at that, what I've seen is the retirement date still be, pushed out again, another 30 to 90 days. But, I think the big emotion and psychological element is actually centered around when somebody makes a decision and then they turn around and they declare, they state, they outwardly speak, to their peers and to their family and to their employees and to their staff that, hey, I'm going to retire. I think that becomes a big deal. And I think that what happens is once people learn of somebody retiring, they oftentimes, extend support and they extend their excitement for that person. And I think once, somebody starts to realize that the people that mean the most to them and the people that are around them are encouraging them and supporting them and excited for them, then the retiree starts to, feel that much better about his or her decision. And then they could kind of say, okay, well, now my friends, my peers, my employees, my staff, my boss, whomever it may be, is accepting of my decision. And now it's like, okay, there's like this weight that's lifted off their shoulder. And so they start to then think about this whole idea of, okay, well, if I'm going to have 10, 12, 13, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week to do whatever I want, what does that look like? Like what am I going to spend my time doing? And I think a lot of times people have a rough idea of what they'll do. And, a lot of it is tied back to hobbies that they were doing when they were working. They just weren't able to earmark as much time as they wanted. And then so they go into this thing called retirement, and then they start to get fulfillment and excitement and enjoyment out of, the hobbies that they could spend more time doing. And then they're able to see a lot of times the progression of, their family, their children and grandchildren, and so they can start to spend time with that. But I think, the emotional and the psychological element of just getting prepared for this monumental event is challenging. And a lot of times it's, thinking it through and talking to a spouse or professional and trying to, just talk through the non-money aspects that goes into this complete change in one's life. And I think if there's an empathetic spouse and an empathetic professional, then it allows for the retiree to become empowered to making a decision to retire and then being able to build up the confidence to declare to the outward, world that they in fact will be retiring 90 days out into the future. And so I think that there's just got to be this conversation that is had, which allows, retirees or potential retirees to just get mentally and psychologically prepared because, it's a big, big deal. And, when I was at this party last night, and talking to these folks, some of whom have retired and some of whom are about to retire, they kind of, enjoy being retired, although they, in some cases I had them talking in conversation and they would always refer back to, the organization and the company that they were associated with. And they would like speak as though they're still part of the organization. And some of them have been a week out of retirement. And some of them have been years out, but yet they still consider themselves part of the company or part of the business that they were running. So it's always interesting to see how even a week, a month, or a few years into retirement, people still kind of are accustomed to and feel as though they're still tied and part of, that work that they were doing for 30 or 40 years in some cases. So it is a big emotional and psychological preparation. But I think if you can have the ability to speak to not only a spouse, but a professional that can talk to the non-money, non-finance element of it, it certainly helps prepare to then be able to declare to the outward world that this is the decision.
There are a lot of people out there, Justin, who can do the money aspect of it. And I'm very glad that you're talking about the non-money aspect of it because this is such a huge life transition. And as you've probably experienced, there are a lot of people who don't handle retirement as well as they thought they would. They build themselves up to it and then, they either go back to work because they don't have something to do. They didn't do this preparation that you're referring to. But my really only follow-up question, if you don't mind me asking, is you kind of talked about the 60 to 90 days in declaration, but when do you think your clients or people who would like to be able to do business with you should start making this emotional and mental plan for when they retire?
I think that it's just only natural that, 1 to 3 years out of a projected point in time, it starts to become that much more real, right? In other words, if they feel as though they're 1 to 3 years away from this retirement thing, they start to feel like they can't make any mistakes within that 1 to 3 year window. So, whereas if they were, 27 years away from retirement, they just feel like, hey, a lot can go wrong that would allow me to kind of recorrect what's going on and get back on track for me to then pick up, where I fell off the tracks. But I think 1 to 3 years roughly is when it starts to become pretty serious. And that's only because now they're like, okay, we need to really, really give strong consideration. However, I do say, Matt, just from a pure planning standpoint, although it is the case that 1 to 3 years is that window of time where people get really serious, I mean, clearly, people should be serious 20 and 30 years away from their declared retirement, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
But I think in practical and real terms, it's usually 1 to 3 years out.
All right, closing words of wisdom for our audience.
I think just making sure that there's the support system in place just from a relationship standpoint, whether it be spouse, children, peers, or, a professional, I think is really, really critical when you're approaching or considering this major transition into a whole nother phase of life. And, I would just encourage anybody who is, close to that, window of time or looking to move into that window of time to start to build that, that infrastructure in their world so that they could lean on those people and really help them through this emotional time.
And with that, Justin, thank you very much for your time today. And for everybody at Bennett Financial, this is Matt Halloran. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast by clicking the subscribe now button below. And if you don't have a person in your life who is having these sorts of conversations like Justin just had today, make sure that you reach out to them and have the right conversation so you can mentally and emotionally prepare for retirement. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on the other side of the mic very soon.